Yeah, the age of embodied humanoid robots, AI-powered humanoid robots is upon us. This is gonna be really exciting. Yeah, we're gonna go over some, I think, some fairly rough numbers on that today, but I think it'll be very clear how impactful this is going to be.
So you call it a call option of business survival. I think you just call it business survival.
Yeah, I call it a call option because if companies don't get in line per se, then they may be left out. And so the call option basically is, hey, reach out to Tesla, reach out to Elon, whatever means you have, if you're a CEO of a major company, and make sure that you're on the list to receive an allocation of Tesla Optimus robots as soon as possible.
I hope executives of major corporations of any company should be watching today because you will outline how much humanoid robots could actually impact a company.
So one of the things here, these are some posts from a couple of years ago, I think now. I did some work on how much companies could save by deploying Optimus or humanoid robots in general. And depending on the your assumptions that go in there in terms of the hourly rate that the companies pay, the midpoint of this analysis was like $15 an hour pay. In that case, you could save up to $615,000 over a 10-year period.
Mhm.
And the question with that is then how much is that worth to a company to pay a humanoid robot if it saves you 615,000? What is that worth to you? And for this analysis, I just kept it really simple and said, well, Tesla gets half of that savings,
Mhm.
right? 300 and some thousand, and the company gets to keep half, right? So they should be willing to pay Tesla about $307,000 for a robot that could save them that kind of money over a 10-year period. Now, of course, my model's evolved since then. I now believe that for the most part, Optimus will be robots as a service. But Elon did confirm last summer that they would do both. They would sell them, and it would be robots as a service. So I think we're looking at both scenarios. And then, of course, the conclusion with that, as we just mentioned, is that if companies don't do this, and we'll see why exactly here in a second, if companies don't do this, the very survival of their business is at stake. This is such a fundamental change in the labor situation. If your main competitor adopts a lower cost form of labor, right? And we can look at over the last few decades how everybody shipped labor to Southeast Asia. And the companies that didn't do that really struggled. This is that times 10,
Mm.
right? That's the consequence of not adopting robotic labor at some point. Now, of course, we're not quite there yet in terms of where the robots are, but that's coming at us very fast. And so my
And
point is if companies don't secure access to that, they could be left out in the cold. And by the time they get robots, it could be too late.
it's also true, right, that because it's supply constrained, not every human or robot vendor is able to produce, tens of millions yet. If one company got a hold of 10,000 human robots and then the other company goes, oh, hey, I want to do it too. And then they call in, but it's like a month later. These companies are booked, they're done.
Yeah.
And now you are in line for 3, 4 years from now in order to get your 10,000 robots. That could be the case, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like going to a concert, right? And everybody wants to go to the concert and all the tickets are sold out and you want in. Well,
Hmm.
you're going to have to pay through the nose to get a ticket if you can get one. If anybody's willing to sell you a ticket. If those tickets are even transferable, right? To use an analogy, right? This is going to be potentially the issue with humanoid robots is that a million robot manufacturing lines sounds like a big number. It's not. It's a drop in the bucket. It's a tiny, tiny amount.
All right. And now, before we get to the actual companies and the impact to them, you want to just walk us through just the baseline of how much a human or robot does, how can it actually impact a company in the first place, right?
Yeah. So here's how I think about it. Let's start with human labor and just understand a couple things, and we'll kind of work into this. So this is like a diagram that shows at the bottom hourly wage rates from $5 an hour up to 40. Now we know that there's other costs for employers, and just using some rough numbers, a $15 an hour wage rate actually might cost the company more like $22 an hour,
Hmm.
right? With benefits and taxes and different things they have to pay. It may be even higher than this, depending on what country, state, city that you're actually manufacturing in. But just to give some rough idea, so when I'm talking about $15 an hour wage, it actually costs the company quite a bit more than that, right? And at $40 an hour wage, for maybe somebody in a Tesla factory actually earning more than that, you're looking at, 55 to $60 an hour effectively for that pay. So I just kind of wanted to show a range here. And one of the things that I did on the next page, Herbert, when I looked at the cost of humanoid robots and Optimus, one interesting thing I discovered was, let's say we focus just on that $15 an hour wage rate. While it costs companies to employ humans at 22, the robot might be something like 750. So you can see right there that there's a dramatic difference in the hourly wage cost. Now, we won't spend time on this show and going into the details on that. We've done that in previous shows. But the interesting thing is, if you look on the next page, the difference between those two previous lines are these numbers. And that for that $15 an hour wage rate, the savings per hour is almost $15.
What? Yeah, yeah.
So as a rule of thumb, if you're paying an
Yeah.
employee $15 an hour, you might be able to save $15 an hour by going to robotic labor.
Oh my God.
Right? Again, rough numbers depending on your assumptions for all kinds of different things, but I think this is in the ballpark.
Wow.
If you're paying somebody $40 an hour, you might be able to save $40 an hour. So this is why I think that this is an absolutely profound thing for the global labor market.
Makes sense. My gosh,
Right?
I like the way you put this. Yeah, because like you keep saying that this is all in is like benefits and taxes and of course the workers' comp, retirement. Just add all that up and then just space, I guess, also. But anyways, yeah, this is a nice way to think of it. It's easy way to think of it. I like it.
It's a rough rule of thumb. Now, I would say, I'd be the first to say this is not going to be the case early on. The robots are going to be very expensive.
Yes.
Right? And they'll go to the companies that have the highest demand and the most urgency to employ robotic labor. But this is some sort of steady state at some point in the future, not too distant future. And then eventually, once the world is, there's billions of robots, these numbers will be very different. It'll be even cheaper.
Mhm.
So then on the next page, we calculate what the lifetime bot savings is. And that, again, that middle one, the $15 an hour, works out to about $615,000 a year of savings over 10 years. Sorry, not 615,000 over 10 years, not per year, but over 10
That's
years
per employee though, right? That's per bot.
per
Yeah.
employee. Yep. And you can see at different wage rates what those numbers are. So even if you were paying, in a lower wage country, $5 an hour, you're still saving $205,000 over a 10-year period. And if you're paying somebody $40 an hour in a factory, you're saving like 1.6 million. Okay. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, let's assume that Tesla gets to keep half of that. Right? They're splitting the savings with the customer. In that case, that bot could be worth $820,000 today to a company willing to do that. Again, I'm not suggesting that Tesla's going to sell bots for that price, but just as an indication of what these things could be worth. Okay. And again, the assumption here is that bots can do the work at the same pace that a human can and is just as capable as a human. That's not yet where we are today. We will get there probably in the not too distant future, and then we'll go beyond that. A bot will be more capable than a human and probably be able to work faster than a human, not to mention work 3 shifts.
Right. I was going to ask that question next. So right now you were comparing it to an employee, but employees only work 8-hour shifts. How does that translate?
The numbers here, I assume the bot's working 20 hours a day for these numbers.
Okay.
So effectively, you're replacing potentially three shifts with these numbers. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's now turn our attention to what that means or what that might mean for a company like Tesla. This is a nice chart that shows Tesla's business model from the income statement perspective. So if we work our way from the left, they sell cars. Last quarter, about 20.5 billion worth. There's regulatory credits, there's leasing, there's the energy business, and then the services and other business. Those all contribute to revenue that's about 28 billion in the third quarter. Then out of that revenue, they have costs, right? Cost of revenue about 23 billion. That's a drain that goes off to the right there. And then gross profit of about 5 billion, about 18% gross profit margin. Now, Tesla's labor costs are both in that cost of revenue, and they're also in that the operating expenses, right? So they sort of sit in both places. So for Tesla, it might be easier to look at an example of a factory, right, rather than the whole company. So what I'm like to present here is a bit of a methodology for other companies, if they're looking at robotic labor, that they could sort of employ. And again, this is a very simple version of this, but hopefully people will get an idea of how to do this. In this slide, we are looking at 3 different scenarios. And this is for Optimus in a Tesla factory. Now, I'm looking at wage rates here of $20, $30, and $40 an hour. I think actually those are low. It probably should be 40, 50, and 60.
Yeah.
So right there, we may be off base, but let's say we're just being conservative. Okay, so the annual labor cost per person, that fourth line down, is about $58,000 to $115,000 a year. And for a factory that has 20,000 employees in it, like Giga Texas, you're looking at labor costs of 1.1 billion to 2.3 billion, maybe even more if you use higher labor rates. Let's now, for argument's sake, say that you could replace half of those workers with people. So you're replacing 10,000 workers, and because one bot can work 3 shifts, you don't need 10,000 bots, you need 3,333. Then the annual labor savings is about $500 million to $1 billion.
Wow. Yeah.
One factory for Tesla.
3,000 bots. That's it.
3,000 bots.
That's it.
Right, and look at the numbers. $1 billion in savings. Right. Actually, let's focus on that most right column because that's probably a little bit more close to where Tesla actually is from its cost perspective. Okay. What does that mean? Well, okay, that factory, let's say, can produce 500,000 vehicles. So the cost savings per vehicle, if you want to look at it that way, is about $2,150.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Every car that comes off the line, they can produce it for that much cheaper. That's a 6% savings on an ASP of about 35,000. So if they wanted to, they could pass that on and reduce the cost of vehicles by 6% if they want to, be even more competitive in the marketplace and sell even more vehicles. Or they could book that as profit and keep that for themselves and improve profit margins. Or maybe it's a combination of both. Now, let's look at actually a more likely scenario for Tesla on the next page. Tesla has the current capacity in the factory, right, of 500,000 vehicles. That's the leftmost column there with numbers. Okay. And in that case, we've got 20,000 workers making $30 an hour, right? And the estimated factory labor cost is 1.7 billion. Okay. And if the factory is making 500,000 vehicles, the revenue at $35,000 a vehicle is 17.5 billion. They've got costs of 15.7, net income of 1.7 billion, a 10% margin, let's say. Again, these are rough numbers. Look what happens now if we desire to double the capacity of the factory, but we want to do it all with robots. Okay, we're not laying anybody off. We're not replacing anybody. We're just increasing production by a factor of 2. You would have needed to hire 20,000 employees, but in this case, now we're going to deploy 6,667 robots at an annual cost of about $233 million. Now your factory, if we drop down, has a capacity of 500,000 vehicles. The additional revenue of 17.5 billion. Total revenue now is 35 billion. Total cost just under 30 billion. And total net income is now 5 billion. We went from 1.75 billion now to 5 billion in net income. And your net margin now is 14%. The additional net income increase is $3.3 billion. This is how profound adding robotic labor could be to a company. Now, this is an extreme example. Can Tesla double production by adding, 6,000 robots? I don't know. Maybe in the long run they can. When I did a factory tour, when I was there with you, Herbert, at the annual shareholder meeting, I saw a lot of employees moving stuff around the factory. I saw a lot of employees doing what I think were pretty simple tasks to the cars. At one point, there were 4 people under a car, screwing in some bolts and so on. These are all things eventually that can be automated by robots, either the industrial ones or humanoid, in my estimation. Again, I'm not an expert in this field, but I just wanted to show you the potential economic benefits to reducing the human labor costs.